Hey guys, welcome back to this video, and we're going to talk about setting up notifications and to maintain your server and know what's going on. So real quickly, server contacts, we set up all the notifications to, well, actually emails that have no one to go to. We decided to send them off to mail.cat. We've also decided under the contact manager to set up medium for emails and pagers, cell phones to high. So if we set the disk integrity check to high, this means that we're going to get an email and our phone page or whatever is going to get an alert. Same thing with these, so you have these options that set everything. Then under server configuration here, this is where you're going to set up those destinations. So you can set up a destination and then everything's going to go to that and you can pipe them off to wherever you want. But this is where you're going to set like the AIM, the ICQ, cell phone, stuff. Okay. The other thing is we've also just installed CSF, which is basically a firewall and a monitoring service that's going to monitor your server and send off email alerts. What we did is we just copied this, extracted it, did it install. It's really simple. You can also go to our website from products and find the automatic install script. And this one will automatically install and replace the email with your email here, and you can also pick a configuration option which is listed here. The next version is going to have at least 8, maybe 12, some different configurations, and we'll also have the ability to you specify the config file. It copies that over, so you don't have to go through and configure your config file and copy it over. It's all automatic one line, so that's what you can do as well if you want to go that route. But we do have it installed, and it does plug in to the plugin manager right here. So this is it plugged in. Now, with this, you have a lot of options. You can, allow an IP, you can deny an IP, ignore an IP, you can check out the allowed and denied IPs. You can view the log files, you can temporarily deny an IP, specify seconds. It's very, very powerful. So you have a lot of control here. Now you can do all this through the command line interface. It's whatever you want to do. Either way works. I personally prefer using the command line interface. The other one here is, this is kind of quick and easy, is it gives you an idea of what's running, how things are set up, what you need to change. So you can go through this and make some changes. For the most part, this is actually really good. You're probably not going to make an OK on all of them, and just because you do hit an OK on all of them does not mean you're safe and secure, but it is a starting point if you're new to this. Although personally, I prefer you guys would actually hire someone who knows what they're doing, because do it yourself is just not going to be the best idea. So, but some of the stuff can actually help. But anyway, I want to talk about editing the config file real quick. Also, because we're running an OpenVZ, we are limited to what we can do with the firewall. We don't have all the modules compiled in. This is default and typical with OpenVZ, so you would have to have your provider enable the modules needed for some of the more advanced functions and for OpenVZ. But if it's in a dedicated environment, like a dedicated server, you're not going to have that problem, because those are actually typically always installed and compiled and configured into the kernel by default. But anyway, to edit the config file, we just go vim blah blah blah, and I actually edited it and it crashed on me, so we're just going to do this. Oops, sorry about that, and do edit anyway. Okay. I will let you know this file is huge, and it keeps growing with more and more configuration options and settings. So this is why you do not want to have to manually edit this time and time again. Okay, insert mode, and first of all, you're going to want to make sure you take testing off. Automatic updates is fine. TCP, UDP, ICMP. You can control which parts are open and closed, which ones you allow communications through. You can get very, very advanced and whitelist part numbers through IPs if you want to do it specifically like that. I mean, there's a lot of configuration that you can actually do through the command line interface, but this is just your quick default setup. Typically, I really don't edit those unless I really need to. You can set your network devices. By default, it's going to operate on all of them. At least I believe that's what it is when I last used it. You can separate by comma, whichever NICs you want to use. There's a lot of monitoring options if you want to do syslog checking, depending on how your DNS set up, you can do that. You can also deny your IP's limit. You don't want to set this too big. Once again, this is more for like access control, small flood blocking. You really don't want to be setting these things too high. You'd really want to get a more dedicated environment, an actual hardware firewall that's designed to handle packets. Defaults typically are okay. Personally, I don't really care much for the verbose command, especially when dealing with an attack. I don't need all that stuff flooding the screen. So I personally would set that to off. You have your IP6 settings. This is new stuff, so you use IP6 there. Once again, you can use this to block email, like spam coming out. You will want to basically run the CSF test to see if this function will happen. It probably won't work on an OpenVZ, as it's probably not going to have the correct IP modules installed for the IP table, so it probably won't work. Otherwise, you can enable that. I personally prefer that over the SMTP tweaks under the tweak settings for WHM. And you can allow, which user is allowed to send out email and stuff. This way, that prevents a user from actually spamming through their username. You actually have control and can limit that. SymFlood settings, you can enable this if you want. The defaults seem to do an okay job. If you really want to get strict, you can set this to 1 and set this to 3. Personally, I would not recommend this. This is about as low as I've ever actually gone, and this is if it's a very, very serious attack. But it really does a pretty good job at dropping connections, pretty much even legitimate ones, so we'll let you know. But you can just enable this. You set this to 1, and it's enabled, but this is about as low as I can go. You might want to read up on the documentation on exactly how to do that, but depending on the attack, you change that based on the attack. Once again, you have connection limit settings. Once again, it depends on the kernel, and if you've actually got the right modules running, you can use this. This is more of like a denial of service attack, not so much of a DDoS protection. What you're doing is you're just checking the connection limits of how many IPs are coming through and making connections, so you can limit that as well. And then you also have flood protection, which is monitoring how many connections per second are coming through, which means it's limiting X amount of connections in X amount of time. Anything past that's going to get blocked. And once again, it requires a special module loaded. Then we also have logging settings. This is for like your logging. If you want to log certain things, how you want to log. If you don't want to log certain parts or anything like that, by default, it's dropping the connections. You can use reject if you want, but you can just leave it at drop unless you have a reason to change it. Okay. Throughout this config file, you're going to have a lot of email alert settings. So this right here is where you're going to type in the the email that you're going to send the emails to, and where you want the emails to come from. You can use like your host name if you like. That's my preference, is to use the host name. Like server2 at my kitty domain.meow. So server 2 would send everything off to like warning Will Robinson warning at my domain.meow. So we know it's coming from server 2, as that's going to be in the from address, and it's going to that one, which is at the ticket system, so we can monitor that way. There's more settings here, but you'd have to look into all this. I can't take the time to explain every little detail. We'd be here for like the longest time trying to explain how to set up everything, how everything works. So this is why I'd recommend, if you really don't want to spend the time to configure and set this stuff up, hire a server administrator who knows what they're doing and has actually worked with CSF, because a lot of these settings can get kind of complicated and confusing, and if you don't know what you're doing, you could end up blocking legitimate users. I mean, we're only like 21% into the file, and we're almost up to like 500 lines. I mean, this file is huge with settings, and it can take like hours, if not days, to completely configure it, to learn how to set everything up so it works in your environment. But you can block by net blocks and permanent blocks based on so many attacks. But most of the time the defaults are typically fine. And if we want to load in like real-time blacklists to keep bad spam out from IPs, we can do that. We can block, certain proxies. So you got some options there as well, but that's going to add some overhead with IP tables because it's getting bigger and bigger from those IPs being loaded in. Real quickly, I also want to touch on the login failure setups. What this is doing is it's tracking, we're getting email alerts too, that if there's a failure, say someone tries to log into FTP or POP3 or something, 5-10 times as it's set here, they get blocked. Now you can set that to like a permanent block, you can set to like a temporary block. If we would have set this to 3600, that's 30 minutes, so a block would mean that they're going to be blocked for like 30 minutes if they log in and fail 5 times. And then if you get, I think it's 5 logins on default, if you get like 5 hits blocked, it automatically changes that to a permanent block and they're blocked from the server completely till you remove that IP. But you can do HA access, CPanel, mod security if you want to factor that in, Sahosa and bind. And then if you want to factor in QoS, which we've compiled into Apache, and if we want to, you can also get some more advanced too, that if you get a lot of Apache errors, you can block those as well. If something happens with CPanel, such as if someone accesses it, you can launch an action, a shell script. You can specify which users you want to send an alert on if they log in. So as you can see, there's a lot of configuration options here. You can set the emails to go to you instantly. Like right here, we've got we're scanning the mail system, looking to see how many emails are going out, so we can send alerts there. We can also specify lower down here that we want to block the script that's sending out emails, so you can have that automatically happen. There's a lot of options in CSF LFD right here, so there's a lot of stuff to read, a lot of stuff to look into. You can probably spend about a week looking up all this stuff, trying to tune everything correctly, but right here we've got email relays. We got connection tracking if we hit say like 300 connections, block, scan interval, send an email, permanent or just temporary. We can check the wait time. We can also specify which states, whether we want to send, receive, or time wait. We can also check what port numbers we want to consider a connection. So you got a lot of options there just alone. We can also do process tracking, and we can track processes and send off alerts. If a process is still running and the binary gets changed or deleted, we can get that alert. You can set this to on. The only problem is if something gets updated, which happens a lot with cPanel, you're going to get this alert and this message until that service is restarted. But if you want to be extra cautious and actually know if something happens, you can do that. Once again, you can also specify an action on that. If a process goes past 10 or uses 200 megs of RAM or is running longer than this, send an email. We can also kill that if it hits one of those. So there's a lot of options there. We have load tracking, and we also have scanning and tracking if we get scanned, such as if someone goes through part 1 all the way up to 50,000, whatever, we can block them before they hit all of them because we're scanning for that. And then we also have account tracking down here, and then we can also have the user interface. There is a user interface with CSF LFD, so you can configure that as well. You can also configure the messenger service, such as if someone gets blocked, we can tell them that they're blocked and tell them how to get unblocked or how long they're blocked. We can do stuff like that. You can also do LFD clustering. We can do part knocking, log scanning. We have statistics if you want to do statistics generation. And eventually at the end you're going to get to like the binaries and where the logs are, and you can customize your own logs and where to look. So all in all, LFD has like a lot of options. I didn't save that one, but if you wanted to actually restart CSF, you basically just do CSF, and right there would do that. The other thing is, if you change things to not only CSF, you want to make sure you restart LFD, because LFD is the actual process monitoring and running. CSF is just the firewall. So there's two different services there you want to make sure you restart. Typically what I just do is I just do service, CSF, restart, and then just also do service. LFD restart, just to basically get both of them. Just if I'm ever make a change, just to do both of them, it's just a good habit. An LFD will in fact actually run a daemon in the background. It's somewhere in there, but it is going to run the background, and it will pop up through cron jobs and just do what it does best. But that's just a quick thing on the CSF firewall. It's not a bad thing. It does a pretty good job. It gives you some better access control. I definitely install it by default, or at least use some type of firewall. If you want to just use IP tables or something, that's fine too. The other thing too, if in fact you're on a VPS and you're running CSF firewall, sometimes I don't know if it's a distribution thing or if it's just all VPS, but there is a need to enable the klog. So what we're going to do is, I think it's going to be under etc init syslog. I think this is it. Okay. And as you can see, we have the klog d being skipped. What you're going to want to do is we're going to take this and hold on here. And that right there is going to enable the klog daemon. This will help with IP tables. You can say, okay, that looks like it. So it's just those three little places. We want to replace that to bring it back online, because that's going to be needed if you're going to want to do kernel logging, and it's really kind of required and needed for some of the functions and features in CSF LFD. So you want to make sure you enable that, and that will bring it back online. So I think that concludes using CSF and LFD and all that. But that really does add some layer of security, so you can keep tabs and everything. Okay, one last little thing, just because we want. Okay, back up here we've got CHKRootkit, and we also got RKHunter up here too. We've got a new version of this coming out here soon. It's going to be much more advanced. It's actually going to incorporate 2 additional services, scanning applications, and with it, so you're going to get a lot more security for scanning to find rootkits. So you might want to check back in about a week or so, download that. It's going to include the options to enable or disable that, but it's going to have a lot more functionality to it. Once again, you type in your email, you can specify how many times you want to run per day with the time, but it's a one-time script install. You just copy, install, you're good to go. A lot of people install RKHunter and CHKRootkit. You can also find the links probably anywhere, because people have been linking to them like all over the place. We also have this. Now you can actually do this through WHM. I forget the actual link to it, but this thing actually does have a check as well. So if in fact you have CPanel running, it's going to use the CPanel the install script instead, or not install script, but security script. So you can just run that, and if you have CPanel, it's going to use CPanels anyway, but it just locks down TMP SHM, so you can use that as well. We're still working on this one, but this is going to be a nice one once done. And we have a simple send deflate, which pretty much is what LFD CSF does, but it runs more of like cron job checking netstat for connections. But if you want to use that one, you can use that one as well. But I would definitely install those two. Those add some other security, but for basic security, well, not really so much security as monitoring. For basic monitoring, installing that with LFD, that can typically give you a really good idea of what's going on with the system, and you can fine tune that to stay on top of things. So that pretty much concludes this session. Once again, if you got questions, comments, whatever, just click the link below. Come join us on the community. Don't forget to subscribe, share, spam the link. Just kidding. But once again, we are trying to get as many videos as possible to explain and help people out here. So if you've got ideas, got friends who needs to hear something, let us know. We'll get a video or a series put out on that. We've got some other stuff going on. But that concludes this video.